so many of you who are watching right now, it's because on some level you've had some trauma in your life and you've had some kind of challenges that may have been causing you a huge amount of pain. And it may have been something that's been in your life for many, 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 many years. And for some of us, it affects us in ways that we don't even realize. And so the point of today is to kind of help you kind of get some insights and to be able to make some kind of patterns of breakthrough so you can kind of shift your perceptions, shift your behaviors by releasing how that trauma is anchored into your body so you can make new behaviors and live life in a different way, a better way, a way that's freer, one with more happiness and more freedom. Now, I'm not saying anything today from my own personal experience of actually undergoing any massive trauma. The closest that I've come to any trauma is almost dying, which is pretty significant. The reason why I don't think of it as being such a big trauma is it was with an asthma attack when I was about 2 years old. And so I don't remember it at all. But my clients who have had horrific traumas over and over again have told me things that seem unbearable. And through working with them and helping them shift it and release how it's anchored into their body and how it's affected their perceptions and way that they view the world, the stories that they're holding on to, by releasing it and changing things, sometimes small little changes, sometimes massive changes, from observing that over and over again, my comments today, my insights are from with working with people. So that's kind of what I want to share with you. We've had a lot of people register today, more than any other webinar. We had 130 people register. And of course, not everyone who registers does show up. And some of the people have already kind of emailed to me and saying they would love the replay, and we will send them that. So for you guys who are here live, please write in the chat. As you have questions bubble into your head, please type, because it will help me shift this webinar and make it more effective for you and for everyone who is listening. And feel free to kind of say hello now if you want, so I can even know that the chat is actually working. For those of you who are watching it, the replay or at a later time, there's no point typing in, but you can. It will come to me at a later point. Awesome. Thank you. Yay. Oh, this is good. Amazing. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so please, as you guys have questions, ask, because it's about you guys. And trauma is this weird thing that probably begins for all of us, at least most of us, when we're born. The birthing process for the mum is pretty full on a lot of the time, but for the baby being pulled out can sometimes cause so much trauma physically in the neck. If not, growing up, that could be being bullied at school. It could be having a parent who's an alcoholic or abusive. It could be a violent crime. It could be so many things. Now, you know what you've gone through, and you know the pain that's caused you. But what we don't know is exactly what, because we are in our experience. What do I mean is, like, you only know how you're experiencing your world right now because you're in your world. And so it's like when you say to someone, what would it be like had it not happened? And the person can always say, I don't know. I actually don't have anything to compare it to, because all I have right now is my experience. So often, trauma can be something that, and for someone that causes the person to lock up and shut down and cause them to be less in the world, reactive, defensive, on guard. You know the symptoms that you guys have. But for someone, those same things, the same traumas, like two people can be abused or raped or have an alcoholic parent, and one person can grow into do the most amazing things in the world, and the other person gets stuck in their traumatic patterns. So why? That's what I want to talk about. Like, why does one person kind of get stuck into these patterns, another person can break through? Because I want to talk now, like, doing whatever I'm doing, I'm in my life, I'm kind of my perception brain connected to like sight and smell and all other senses, touch and whatever. And all of a sudden, something really traumatic happens. And then my body, remember, it's a survival based machine, if you will, and it just goes into shutdown mode. Now, I'm going to give you a simple example. Like, You're driving along and you're about to have like just a simple car crash. Uh, all of a sudden, you've slammed your foot on the brakes and you're skidding and you're waiting for the impact and you're just waiting, waiting, waiting. But you haven't hit yet. But while you're waiting for all that experience, all that tension you're building in your body is like building, building, building. And when you actually have the impact, vroom, if you're that experience, vroom, is captured into your body like a snapshot. Vroom, it's in your body. Now, when you get out of the car, you got to deal with the person, you got to deal with the situation, make sure everyone's all right. Da, 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 da. There's so many things. And then, wow, when was it? Now that it's finished, you got to carry on with work, with the kids, with the other stuff, other stresses of life. And so, what happens is, how and when do you deal with the trauma? A massage is, I don't believe, going to release that. Some people may have different opinions. Maybe you could talk it through to someone. I don't think that's always necessarily going to release it. How do we release it? Some people will just kind of drink some alcohol to try and numb themselves out of that horrible experience that they're in. What can you do to shift that impact that is stored into your body? No matter what you've had in your life, what can you do? So it kind of makes you kind of wonder, well, what is a trauma anyway? Because a trauma is a physical thing quite often. It can be an emotional thing or a mental thing. It can be something that's built up over periods of time, like lots of little things, which you don't really notice at the time. And then you look back in your life and go, that was really traumatic. Now, I've had clients and I said to them, just because I'm looking at their form when they come in to meet me, and it just seems like the way the symptoms are appearing, all the challenges that they're having in their life. And I'm like, well, have you had much trauma in your life? And I've had interesting people say things like, not really sure. I don't think so. And they think for a bit and they go, and I remember one lady really clearly, she said to me, well, my dad once had a shotgun that he pointed to me and he said he was going to kill me. Does that count? And I'm, yes, that counts. What? Um, and I've had other people say the most horrific things. And the thing is, you don't always realize it's traumatic at the time because, like when you're out, you're sitting here and it's going dark and it's dark now, but when it's getting dark, but you're so busy focusing on something, you don't notice it's getting dark. And then all of a sudden, it's like, wow, how did it get so dark? Because we're constantly adapting. So what happens in our life, some trauma event happens, either lots of little things or a really big one, and boom, then we start noticing because our life's different. Now with a big trauma, like something that can just one moment, one incident can completely change people's lives. I have a lady who was emailing me back and forward about this webinar, and she just had something happen just last week, and it's kind of created like a post-traumatic stress kind of response in her whole body. She said she's so keen to come. She just wrote me an email a little while ago saying, look, I really can't make it because at the moment, since this has happened, my body's kind of gone into shutdown mode and I feel like I need to sleep a lot. And so I'm just listening to my body and going to sleep. Now, for other people, the symptoms just so varied, but you know what you have. And so I'd like for some of you, if you are aware of your symptoms, feel free to kind of write what they are. And the reason why I'd like you to do that if you're open to sharing is because you'll start seeing that there are similarities and patterns, but there's also very different things. Now, some of you may realize, well, it's just everything across the board, like it's a hypervigilance or a sensitivity, or I just feel like I always have tension. I'm always in a scared state. I would consider those things symptoms or stuck in being in reaction. I'm just going to put a question that I'm going to say, and then I'm going to read that. I'm either going to answer it straight away or that. So feel free to write some symptoms right now if you guys are keen. Okay, it's a really good question, and we've kind of answered it, but we're going to go into more detail. I'm going to read the question. It says, "Hi, Dov. What about events that we don't identify as trauma when looking back on them because that's our way of dealing with it? Obviously, it still affects us, but we're not necessarily aware of it affecting us." Yeah, I mean, one of our ways of dealing with trauma, as a lot of people are aware of, is we just kind of like erase it, block it out from our memory completely. Like a lot of kids who've had some horrific traumas in their life, they are unaware that it's even happened on a level because what happens is it's a survival mechanism. you dissociate or disconnect, and then you do not know that it's happened, so you can cope and survive. Now, that has a purpose. And I find it fascinating when some people would like to kind of like, it's like the brain's kind of got this mechanism in place to help us. And some people will prod and pry and try and open it up, and they'll be on a self quest to try and delve in to see what if, or is there, or was there some kind of trauma. Now, I've seen some clients try and go down that pathway, and I never recommend it as a constructive thing from what I've seen because of it. Now, some people like to kind of get more depth in their life by going into their traumas to try and see if they can make breakthroughs. Our approach is more like, can we release the trauma, release it from our experience, and then move forward into more what we do want. So what strategies will help us get what we do want? So, I mean, you don't have to be able to identify the trauma that had happened, because if it's an event that was just very traumatic, or sometimes it's not one specific thing, like a lot of the times people will say to me, it was a period where we had quite a few deaths in the family, and we just dealt with one and then dealt with the other one and dealt with the other one, and before I knew it, I was just kind of in this really bad state. And it was only looking back on what happened that I realized how traumatic that was. And so it's not really about necessarily being able to capture it, or what is its purpose. I mean, it's not like you can go inside and find the one trauma and then shift everything. Sometimes you can, but that's when it's more one specific thing. Like some people have had a trauma, like a specific event. For example, let's say someone's raped, and that can be playing on a thought loop, just around and around in the background of their mind, or what brings up feelings, or certain things can trigger it. Certain people look similar to the person who did it, or certain locations can trigger these memories. And so what happens is then you need to kind of have specific strategies for blocking that, or for not doing that, or resolving it, or for shifting it, or minimizing it. And there's lots of different strategies that you kind of use for the person. So you got to kind of work out for yourself, is it a whole bunch of little things that have happened, or was it one big event? And for some of you, it's a combination of both. So more importantly, is what do you want to do, even though you've had trauma? Because we have the same, and I would say the main reason I'm doing this webinar is I really want to start sharing this concept, kind of what is the wound, sorry, what is the gift beneath the wound? Because every wound that we go through, there's a gift. All we have to do is create enough safety, ease, and growth physiology in our body. We'll come back to that in a minute. What is growth physiology? We'll come back to that. But when you have the growth physiology beneath every wound, you can go inside, and then there's a gift to be experienced, to be explored. So the clients who go out and have these amazing things happen in their life, they're doing it because they're now experiencing the gift. Now we'll come back to this. So your physiology can be in one of two states. It can either be in I'm in defense mode, I'm in lockdown. And that's exactly what happens, how the trauma gets trapped into our body, kind of what we were saying before. So all of a sudden we go stuck into that fight or flight. We're in survival mode, where sometimes become hyper vigilant, which means because of something happened, we never know if we're going to be safe. So we like put the, if you will, the feelers out. And it's like you can pick up on anything. You have these big startle reactions, and your just whole system is wired. Now, if that's a 24/7 thing, you're still coping. You've still got to go out. You're still going to make your cup of teas and your meals, and you go to work and you catch public transport and whatever you do. But all you're going to know is you're going to always feel like you're on edge, or a little bit anxious, or a little bit nervous, or a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit stressed, or a little bit tense, or you get what I'm saying. And what happens is it's just because the body's kind of stuck in that kind of response. Okay, I'm going to back and read some of these questions. Oh, a great question. What do you do? What about when you're afraid to act because of fear? So that's kind of what we were talking about a little bit. There's only two lenses that the body can be in. You can be in growth physiology, where you're open and expansive and free. That part of the nervous system, your brain, is about going out and exploring the world. A stranger is someone, a friend you've not met yet. When you're in contrast in defense physiology, everything could be dangerous. That is dangerous could be fearful. Like what could go wrong? What happens if? It's like that's stuck on, and so your thinking is almost like So a stranger, for example, is like, what do they want? You kind of could think the worst, or just in case negative scenarios, you'll enter a room like, how do I run out of here? Like, where's my exit? When you're in growth physiology, this was like there's more space within you and around you. There's deeper connection. Everything's kind of like almost slower or more relaxed and more enjoyable rather than being in there. So you're in growth or defense, growth or defense. And when you're in defense, you're naturally plugged into the fear. Now, some people would just say, I'd love to have no fear. And not a good suggestion to not have it, because it's there as a protective mechanism in our lives to keep us safe. But what happens is if it's hypersensitive, meaning a little thing you can't even do, like you can't talk to a group of people, you can't introduce yourself to a stranger, you can't just walk down like a relatively safe street because of what could or what ifs. That's when it's like you're stuck too much into the fear response, and that's because your body is in defense physiology. Your nervous system is in mode, and so that's the magic, is being able to kind of release that. So you realize, I do have the other state. Just because it's been off for so long doesn't, dormant. What happens? We want that one to open up and be activated, the one of growth and then more happiness and ease. Um, Yes, we have. There is going to be. Someone missed the beginning. We do have the intro to this, and the whole thing is you can watch again later. We are going to send out the replay. Absolutely. Okay, so you've got this defense physiology, and it's keeping you trapped, and you have a whole bunch of different symptoms, things keeping you kind of in this state. Sometimes we're not even aware. It's just manifesting as kind of anxiety. I'm aware of that. I'm aware of how I'm always on edge, or got the tension, or I can't sleep at night, or I'm always tired. The interesting thing is there's just so many symptoms. Same with anxiety. There's just so many symptoms of anxiety. The list just goes on and on. It's a really big list. So, more importantly, you have your experience right now. Maybe if it was an event or a series of events, if you think about them or think of one of them, notice how you feel in your body. Just by focusing on a painful event, you're actually evoking it. You're actually almost lighting up that part of the neurology and your physiology, and you start feeling it. Likewise, if I asked you to kind of shift that, your thinking and your focus to where is an area of joy or happiness, or what was something that was beautiful today. Like, to me, one of the most beautiful things was just seeing this kind of most amazing cloudscape today. Just, uh, and so when I think of that, it's a very different time to thinking of like a really painful thing. And so a really important thing that you guys have to learn to do, if you've had an experienced traumas and you're now stuck in this defensive physiology, is say, okay, now right now my thinking can take me into a place that's more stressful. Now, the more stress I have, the more I'm going to get back into that defensive physiology. So when I think of past wounds or present stresses or future potential worries and stresses, I'm going to keep myself in that vicious cycle. If I shift that, and then I start thinking about, what I do want to have happen, what I can control, and kind of help to influence positively, kind of the amazing people in my life and the interactions. And I kind of shift my focus into, and where I really want to go from this is the gift, right? The gift beneath the wound is the gift. And if I access kind of what that is, well, then there can be some amazing changes because you feel different. Now, see, in this moment right now, I can go one or two different ways. And so I have to kind of know with my focus and do that. Now, some of you will say, it's more complicated than that, and I would agree. Most things are, and they're not at the same time. See, it's sometimes as easy as it's really easy once you know how to do it, and impossible when you don't know. It's like I remember as a kid, uh, little kid, and like looked at the class in front. They were doing these crazy math equations on the board. It just made no sense to me. And I went, I'll never be able to do that. And I was quite good at maths. But then I kind of went to the room, the year later when I was actually doing it, and I remember going, I'm doing it. not bad. But then I'd look at a different class and see what they were doing. Go, wow, same thing. But then I was there and I was doing it. And so what happens with any skill, and the whole point, there's strategies and skills that you need to learn to kind of break trauma out of your body or to stop re-traumatizing yourself. You can have a micro trauma over and over again, just by keep thinking of the past one. Um, a client, she was really angry because of how she'd been badly treated by, from her perspective, from the medical profession, just a whole series of things that had happened. And as a result, she was angry a lot. Now, something happened many years ago. I'm sure the person who did it doesn't even remember it or think about it today, and is so busy with other things, it's just not part of their life. But to the person who I'm talking about, my client, she experienced that anger every single day when she thought about it. The reason it came up, because in conversation, I noticed she was getting all worked up and angry. And I went, wow, I bet you do this all the time. And so we did a little calculation to see how often she did it. And over the years, it was this phenomenal, massive amount of time. So I want to know, where are you putting your energy and your focus? Now, remember, we're saying you may not even be focusing on these things. It just may be creating like a filter because you've had the experiences, the traumas in the past, and as a result, your body's living or stuck in the defensive physiology. And so, if you will, your perceptions are of what could go wrong, or just a little bit reactive to people, or hypersensitive towards yourself, a little bit on edge. Now, that's just a combination of a few things. One, your nervous system being stuck, anchored into this mode, and two, certain thought patterns, and all those can be like learned new strategies. So there's a mental component to dealing with trauma and a physiological component. I want to talk a little bit about the mental because we have been so far, but we're doing a bit of both really. The One of my first ever clients, or groups of clients that I worked with who had a lot of trauma in their life, were actually psychotherapists and psychologists. And I found out a lot of people who went into that pathway in their own life was because they had a huge amount of trauma. And as they were sharing me some of the stuff they had gone through, it was amazing to me. At first, I'm like so interested that they wanted to kind of help other people. But then for them, that was their way of experiencing and expressing a gift from it. And they had done anything they could, because for years and years ago, they had dealt with it mentally, but they hadn't necessarily dealt with it in their physiology in their body. And so, almost, even though they were at peace with it, as one can be, in their mind, because their body was like still holding on to some of the trauma, there was that disconnect almost. And so when we released a whole bunch of the stuff out of the body and it just kind of went, all of a sudden, because of that mindset, vroom, they just absolutely took off. Now, a lot of people who haven't had that training, of course, then as they kind of release it in the body, they're like, there's this kind of different state. They're like, okay, I'm freer and I'm feeling all these different things. But then they have to kind of work on their stories about what happened. Because some of what happened, let's say it was a parent who neglected you and you feel really hard done by and it was unfair and it was blah 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 blah, that's fine. You have every right to hold on to your stories, and at the end of the day, you're responsible for your own happiness. We all are responsible for our own happiness. And sometimes we get caught up in this victim or blaming mode. We all have access to it, and some of us do it a bit more than others. And when you've had a lot of trauma, it almost feels justified and right. Like the lady I was telling you about before, who was doing anger all the time, that she was fair enough to do that. I mean, it made sense if you knew what had happened to be angry. Had a client come in and he rolled himself into my office because he was in a wheelchair, and I was helping a friend see her clients while she was overseas, and so I'd never met this guy, but he comes in and he's kind of a happy disposition and everything, so I'm working with him, and I was just curious. I asked him about his mind. He just, like, he seemed happy, and I'm like, how can you have such a big thing and still have such a great mindset? To me, that's inspiring. So I wanted to know what his strategy. He said, one moment. He didn't do that. That was me. He was wakeboarding with his mates, and he did something, and then landed badly, and then kind of contusion on his spine, which resulted in him being paralyzed, can't walk. And he said the doctor told him he never learned to walk again, and in his mind he said, "Bullshit! I'm going to beat them. I'm going to beat it. I'm going to make it happen." You know, you've seen a lot of these miracle stories, and he decided he was going to be one of them, and he was determined, and he worked hard and put his mind into it, and he was angry and upset and agitated and pissed off and annoyed, and he did this and he did this and did this, and then one day he realized after years of doing it, he just accepted that he was going to spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. And he said, when I made that acceptance, you know, within myself, and I just realized that, I also realized that it could be okay. And I decided, he said, I decided, it's a cool word, that I was going to make that my reality. And he did. And I was like, you're a cool guy. I like you. And it was because he had experienced it. And so, you know, we are in that victim mode. We feel like, I don't have energy. I'm in lack. It's just, poor me. And then all of a sudden, if it hurts, it's going to hurt so bad until something happens in your life where you get to the point where you make that decision, and then you kind of go, I'm going to decide. And then when you decide that you want something better for your life, that's when things start opening up. That's when you start seeing a random webinar show up, or someone gives you a book, or you know, you see a post on Instagram, or just any little thing, or you talk to someone, and before you know it, you started to making progress. It's the coolest thing, but it all begins with making a decision. Let's read a few other little things. Um, okay, this is good. I suffer with bad anxiety from trauma. I was abused as a child. I'm 36 and have always suffered with it. I don't want to use medication, and I'm pretty proactive with healthy living. Cool. I see a psychotherapist, get lots of nature, etc. Any other suggestions to combat this? Yeah, lots. And that's kind of the magic of this today. I think the first thing that I want you to do is to kind of get inside and have a really strong willpower that you actually can be one of those people who goes and finds goes and blah blah, who goes inside and finds your gifts and express them in the world. Become that person. Make a decision that you will find a way, whether you find some guide, if it's your therapist or someone else or me or anyone through authors, it doesn't matter, but you will find that person that's going to help you, because it's not about anyone else, it's about you. And when you kind of make that, and I want you to start in your mind by creating, like, what is your hero's story, like on the other side, when you're living in a bliss or better state or calmer state, who are you being now as a result? What does that look like? See, if all of you were to close your eyes for a second, and with your eyes closed, just take a deep breath in your nose and out your mouth, and then in your mouth and out your nose. As you settle down and kind of relax inside, I want you to become aware of how you see yourself in your mind's eye. Like if you were kind of describe yourself to someone else, what is the picture that you have in your mind's eye? And I want you to kind of just notice that. And if you were to describe yourself in detail, would you describe yourself as, I'm an anxious person? Would you, if discussing and explaining to kind of help someone understand who you were, would you share it? And as the trauma is a big, significant part of your narrative. Okay, everyone, open your eyes if you did close your eyes. So that's really an important way to start, is kind of what you need to do is that picture in your inside and how you see yourself. You're going to kind of say, you're always going to conform to that way that you see yourself. So if you want a life where you feel magnificent, you've got to start seeing that as a possibility. Now, there may be such a big gap between the two things that seems ridiculous. And so, and you're stuck there. But then if that's too far, just make this a little bit over there. So just shift this one a little bit in that direction. Makes sense? So a little bit better, which may be a little bit less symptomatic. So a little bit less, like less of the anxiety, just it drops down a bit. I had a client come into me, and I'm not kind of wanting to have a go at therapists and anything, but a client recently came in, and in this initial session, he'd been referred by a friend who done really well. And he was a little bit skeptical, but my friend's been pushing me to come for a long time, so I'm going to give it a go. He said, I know what's going on because I've been having therapy and we've been talking about it for like the last 15 months. Can't remember the exact date right now, but it's been a long time. And he told me what had going on, and it was all to do with this father of his who was very kind of controlling and kind of. And I heard what he was saying, and in my head, I'm going, "What? This is an amazing excuse, but you're not living your life, and now you've got this great reason to stay stuck." And I told him flat out, I said, bullshit. I called him on it, and I said, look, you're entitled to believe what you want, but here's how I see it. I think your body's just gone into this pattern now. You're cooking into stories about what happened in the past, but you're only looking at it from a perspective. And I said, you know, I don't go into too much detail. Anyway, where he is now in his life, he's in an amazing place. Like, he's just making the biggest breakthroughs. And he says to me, I didn't even believe it was possible when I first came in. And that's because whoever you choose as your healer, your helper, your coach, your guide, whatever you want to call the person is that you find to kind of help you pull out of these patterns, make sure they have an outstanding kind of view in their mind of what's possible for you. Maybe speak to some of the other clients and kind of see, are their lives really like kind of like shifting? Because to me, the idea of like being stuck in therapy for years and years and years to exist, because most people have strategies for coping. When you have trauma, you actually stuck in coping mode and in surviving mode. And so you get by each day, you get by each week. And because of the world's accelerating and pace and everything is getting more crazy, and these things are making it so much worse. That was not a dig at Apple, but phones and smartphones, because everything's getting so intense and so fast. It doesn't make it easier. It actually makes it harder. And then we need new strategies for being able to calm down the nervous system, for getting refocused. Do you know what I mean? And so for you have a new vision of what's possible for yourself. That's what I would love for you to do. Like, just really kind of aim it at some ridiculous level, and then make little steps backwards. And then what is that first thing to do to kind of where you are today? What needs to happen within yourself to get there? Hope that's helpful. Someone's written about hanging on to stories this week. I kept saying to myself, you have a choice. Yeah, about repeating all the stories about bad things that have happened. Yes, we do. I'll tell you a cool quote. I really like it. One of my teachers taught it to me. He says, his name's Donnie Epstein. He says to me, when you're in discover for those who don't know is kind of when you're like trying to figure things out. When you're in discover kind of time in life, the past. I'm paraphrasing here. The past kind of defines you. It's like when you're in transform mode, it's like kind of what I was talking to the other guy before about, saying set this new standard and say whatever I need to do to make that happen. That's transform mode. So when you're in transform mode, you defy your past. You say no way. So that's not going to define me. I'm not defined as an anxious person because I have spent decades that way. What do I need to do to get there? Now, I have had clients who have been from pretty much birth, had horrific traumas, and their whole nervous system, their whole experience has been as this almost like generalized anxiety, kind of just constant 24/7 to varying degrees. And what happens with certain enough care and working with them, almost it turns off. So they get to experience the nervous system without it. So it's possible. But in transform energy, and it says when you're awakened and kind of awakens more kind of in this more connected, open state, when you're totally in growth physiology. And so when you're totally in this growth state, it's almost like you recreate the past. And you don't really go back and recreate the past, of course. But what happens is the way that you experienced and look at it is different. Because if I was sitting across from you and I held up an object and I asked you to describe to me what you were seeing, you would say, okay, I'm seeing the silver thing. And I'm going, what? It's not silver. You go, yeah, it's a big silver thing. And there's an apple on it. And I'm going, what? The little leaf at the top, a little bite of it. You're like, are you crazy? Like you're like sitting right opposite of me, and it's like you're completely lying to me. It's like, you're convinced this is how it is. Because what happens is, in reality, all I was getting was a kind of, a rectangular shaped black thing. And so what happens is, often in life, we are stuck looking at things from one perspective. This is my truth, the way I'm looking at it, and that is a different person's truth. But the reality is, there's multiple different ways of looking, different perspectives, different ways of looking at things. When you've had the trauma, you're stuck in that way of looking at things, and it's almost like you can't get out of the experience. And so what happens is, when your body goes into growth physiology, you can actually hold different perspectives. That is an incredibly healing thing to do. And for all of you, I recommend, you can start exploring different ways about holding on perspectives and looking at things for different, not specifically, don't start with looking at your traumas that have happened, but just in general, like a little tiny thing, like a little mini stress. Maybe you're having a little minor confrontation with your boss, or you're having a certain, a partner conflict, and just see if you can see it from their perspective, or see it from an observer's perspective, and you'll be amazed at what can happen from doing that. Okay. Cool. Whoop, I'm just reading some of the questions. That's why I'm. Here's a good question. Oh, there's lots of good questions. Okay. Hmm. How do you shift rejection that took root some time ago? Okay. So let's start going to answer that question a little bit and start talking about the gift beneath every wound. So, what happens if a wound happens to you, something really traumatic, and as a result, it creates like a certain sensitivity, a certain reaction. So now you see the world differently to someone who has not had that experience. Let's just say you're bullied as a kid, really, people saying really nasty things to you, and so you shut down. But also, you know what that feels like. Okay. And so, because of people being mean to you, see the world differently, and maybe now you do different things. Maybe you hide, and it causes you to kind of go through isolation and feel withdrawn, which causes you to feel empty. And the emptiness feels you kind of really raw. The rawness causes you to start seeking. Because you start seeking, you start reading. Because you start reading, you start learning a whole bunch of things. And it opens up this quest: what is the point of life? Which opens up this magic thing, this what is the beauty in life. And so you start doing things and learning things, and you're learning yoga and meditation, and you're meeting these amazing people, and then you've learned kind of that about change. And so what happens is, along the way, it's what started as a painful thing. You've, because of it, you've learned such amazing things, and your mind's totally opened up. And so now you're just in this amazing place. And if you see other people being kind of bullied, it would, because you've been on that experience, you've been on the other side of it, you know how painful it is. And so you would go out of your way to include people and to make sure other people are feeling welcomed and loved. And you'd have the compassion for the people who may be on the fringes of society and non-judgmental. And so all of a sudden you've developed compassion, and so the list goes on. The more and more and more you kind of go into the gift, the more you can get out of it. Now, some of you are still in your wounds a bit, and it hasn't had time to heal, and I don't have enough growth physiology yet. But that's where you want to be. This is where you are. Okay. So at least looking at the possibility of the gift and when is it going to manifest in your life, that in itself starts opening things up to you. It creates for you also like a direction and energy flow, which is pretty exciting. So um so the rejection that took started happening a long time ago. um I love the word root. It's kind of like a tree of roots. It's kind of like it's in there or whatever. Um, Maybe it's a weed. Maybe it just looks like a weed, but it's a beautiful, a beautiful plant. I mean, it hurt at the time, the rejection, and maybe now you have a sensitivity or hypersensitivity. So you prepare yourself for rejection when it's actually not there, or you think people may be saying things and rejecting you when it's your own beliefs or possible views. That's all possible. But what also happens is, that means you're probably really good at reading people. You've probably learned to be really good at judging social situations, and you know, that could be kind of the gift in it. So I want you to explore some of the wounds and the directions, how it created a sensitivity for you guys because what had happened. You know, how do you see the world differently? And what are some of the benefits of seeing the world in this new way? The person who develops compassion, maybe they developed it because of this. I had a client and she was so her parents kind of neglected her in her mind. The kind of they were so always busy and focused on sports and stuff that they would just take the whole family and just put them on the sideline, do their things, and at the end of the day take them home. She said so many days we were just so hungry because we wouldn't eat until they got home after training, and we're just always just kind of just and we hated it, but like that's just our lives. And so she is now as a result, a reaction. She's just always got food. No matter where she goes, she's got a little bag, a little sandwich, a little things, a little raisins in there. She showed me she had little treats in her bag. She never wanted to be anywhere in case, you know, she didn't have food because of that old pain for her was there. And it created a sensitivity. So with her, you know, people around and other kids and whatever, she went out of the way to make sure that they were being heard. Now, we could all do with more people in our lives who actually take the time to listen to us. So many people are masterful at just talking, talking, talking. As I say this right now, it seems funny because I've just talked the whole time. Slightly different context. But sometimes you'd have an interaction with someone and you end up and you kind of go, that person just spent the whole time talking. They didn't ask any questions. They just kind of mode. And it's kind of sad when that happens because that person's stuck in that mode of so if you want something to play with, flip into that perspective and be that person. I do that with other people. And you'll find that a lot of people are suffering with these different challenges or had different traumas, and it affects the way they see the world. I like to often jump into my clients' worlds after they told me about some of the stuff that's happened. Not for long and not for too much depth, just to kind of get like a okay, and then come out and see if they can get like a different sight. See if I can go in and just get a little glimpse, or if you can jump out to a different place and get a different glimpse. When you come back, you might be changed a little bit in a way that actually makes your life a little better. And that's the whole point of learning any new skill, right? You kind of just get this little woo, and then little change. Okay, question reading time. Um, that's cool, man. This is cool. Okay. I'm going to share this. Just something to share. Amazing. I gave up antidepressants for the first time in 21 years this week's. Wow, 1 week free. Wow. Not saying they haven't or they aren't helpful, but I got stuck in the thought that I couldn't cope without them. Long story how I got the courage to give them up, but it's really helped me notice my thoughts and reprogram my negative ones. I'm certainly not perfect at all. None of us are, but it's made all the difference to feel like I'm in control of my own mind. Good on you. Just wanted to share how powerful our minds can be. Yeah, either in a negative or positive way. And just noting your thoughts can be the first step to changing our life. Thank you so much for sharing. That is amazing. Now, I got two clients right now who are in the process of coming off their meds. And I like to always say to him, do you know what? Don't expect it to not be kind of a little bit rocky. I say, I'm going to contradict myself. I say it might be a little bit rocky. Okay, it will be. And on the back of one of my books, one moment, please. It's quote: "A mind once stretched by a new idea never returns to its original dimensions." Now, what that means is, in this regard, is whatever happened in life that got you into that place where you were stuck, and all of a sudden now, if you're doing different things, thinking different things, control of your thinking, having a different picture in your mind, in your mind's eye, making little steps, making that decision, all these are little things that you didn't do before. Now, knowing these things, you can't go to the place where you didn't know it. And so you are going to be different. So you're going to have a different experience. So allow yourself to have a different experience. It may be challenging. And when the challenges do arise, or the little bubbles, go, okay, notice that sometimes as the chemicals are being leaving your body, it will feel weird. Now, is that weirdness the old symptoms? Can be, but often it's just a discharge, like a detox. So I just wanted to mention that. Feel free to contact me for more specific information because it's a little bit off topic for this webinar. But please contact me and I'll happily kind of give you some, happily to kind of share that with you. Okie dokie. But amazing for you. Good on you. A question: can you convert the pain to a source of energy? This is what the NSA is all about. Yes, really, you can. Trauma, it's snapshot, anchored into your body. All that energy is bound in your body, right? And for most people, it's anchored into our spines and a nervous system. So you see someone and they're kind of like, they kind of hold on. It's just all tension. I can put my hand on someone's spine and kind of get a sense of how much trauma or tension there's been in their body. My teacher, he does this thing and he talks about it in I think a few of his books, but 12 Stages of Healing, he talks about with his clients, he could put their hand on like certain tissues of the body and say, what happened? Like, and he'd go like 12 years ago. And the person would tell them like what happened, what event or what trauma happened that many years ago. And I always thought that was the most fascinating thing. And then a few years ago, he taught us at one of his real advanced seminars how to do it. I thought it was such a cool thing. So I started developing that sensitivity skill. And then I started kind of, learning how to do it and asking people. And it blew me away, the ridiculous things. And I stopped doing it partly because it's just a little bit almost too much information that I was getting. I remember one person was all this tension was kind of anchored into his stomach and we're kind of in all that area around up there. And I kind of asked, I said, well, what happened about 15 years ago? And he's told me a story about how he was kind of, when he was traveling, he was like part of a, hijacked and then like kind of taken away and almost murdered and like, there's a lot. So that energy is bound in the body and it has almost like a time stamp to it and a signature, and it's just there. And what happens is you can kind of release it if you know how. And that's one of the magical things about the work we do. One of the techniques is based on the NSA, is actually being able to release the energetics of that in the body and take that bound energy and use it in a constructive way. And that can be so freeing for so many people. I had when I was working in Melbourne a few years ago, um, a family brought in their daughter because she was on the playground and then she fell in the monkey bars and she fell on her back, and she was wearing a backpack at the time, but she came in and her whole body was like totally locked up, right? And she was acting all irritable and grumpy, and they just said, let's just check, see if there's something there. And I just could feel her spine. It was almost like it had just gone in that mode. And then it took, kids are amazing. It doesn't take much and they just release so much, wiggle it all out, and then back to being kind of wow again. In the same way, you've had a trauma, your body may be stuck into that pattern. But if you can kind of release that, wow, that is a cool thing. That is what the work is about releasing those energetic patterns, if you will. But also what's cool is that is just bound energy. And in that is just a fuel source. If you think of how much energy it takes to hold yourself into that defensive physiology, and if you can redirect that in a constructive way, that's what I want for you guys. Okay, another question. I experienced many traumas as a child and young person and thought I had managed well until I had my kids. I've since realized I now spend so much energy protecting them and anxious for them and almost anxious when things aren't perfect for them. Mm-hmm. I've had a child with serious medical problems and it has sent my anxiety through the roof. I'm now paranoid about her dying and sudden death is part of my experience. How do I become more grounded and calm? She feels like everything feels like it's out of my control. Okay, Tina. Hard. Life's hard with so many times, for so many people. And I'm going to suggest a few things, which I hope will be helpful for you. One of them, you've said that you thought you had managed it really well, and I think you did. And I think you did manage it well. And I have a lot of clients who everything's okay, and when they have kids, all of a sudden, everything gets amplified. And the problem with us getting into defensive physiology is we go into coping mode. And in coping mode, we do aim to manage, as in we aim to get by. And so the strategies that you had invented, had created, had adopted, had learned were perfect for helping you get by. But the stresses of life amplify, and then those strategies are no longer, they no longer work. So all of a sudden, with the world speeding up, you can't use some of those old strategies. When you have kids, there's so much to do. There's so much less you time. So all of a sudden, now you have less time to use some of those strategies. Now that the having the potential fear of losing your child, um, and thinking about that. So please go back to the earlier part of the webinar. We talked about how often you kind of do think about that. Maybe get like a little clicker, and each time you think about it, stop, and then opposite thought, okay, and then just become aware of that. Um, Really important to become for you to monitor how, if you will, addicted you are into those, or those, how ingrained those thought patterns are for you. So you've developed these managing strategies, and that now you've got a child who's got medical challenges, and so one of the potential scenarios in your mind could be something resulting in her death, and so that kind of puts the whole body into this kind of extreme fight or flight each time you think it. And or even a minor fight or flight is just when you're already at capacity, it's, so of course your anxiety and everything's going to go through the roof, as you said. um, so what you need to do is become aware of what you are doing. And there's a thing which seems to be really common with so many people with anxiety, and it's about certainty. And what happens is when there's an area in life that's uncertain, it's like too much change, we focus on it. Like what will happen, and I don't know. And it doesn't make us feel safe. It doesn't make us feel grounded. It doesn't make us feel a sense of stability. And so the certainty that we want, we're so busy looking for what we don't have. And so the more you notice it, the more you start noticing it, the more you start noticing it, and then you start getting in reaction to that. And so some of that's happening with your thinking. So I want you to start becoming aware of how you do stability, how you focus on what is the same, and notice how when you're kind of in a more amplified anxious state, it's to do with all those other things going on. And I want you to play with that, and then let me know how it's going, and then we can kind of work with you. Um, okay. Tina said again, I even heard one nurse describe me as intense. Oh, what does that mean? As she did the handover to the next nurse, I was so hurt as she had been in intensive care, and all I could think of was, of course, I'm intense. Yeah, you're allowed to be. Um, you're allowed to be. I mean, imagine if the opposite, if you were like, whatever. To be that, you would have to not care. Do you know what I mean? I would say that sucks having had that experience, uh, but let's focus on how you'd like to be. How would you like to be in a situation? I mean, let's say for whatever reason you can't control the variables with your daughter, um, but you've still got your own nervous system, which can either be in defense, fight or flight, freak out, scared, anxious, stressed mode, or what can we do to help it kind of be in a calm, more relaxed place, and just in a sense of ease. And so the more you do that, see what starts happening is when you start actually calming down, you actually create a more loving, nurturing, supporting energy for everyone around you as well. And I don't mean to say that now because you're stressed that you're not doing that. I'm just saying it's going to amplify the magic that you already are bringing to the world, if you know what I mean. So all of a sudden, I mean, you can be like, I'm just doing all these things for people, and then all of a sudden you're still going to do all these things for people, but there'll be some enjoyment in there for you in those magical moments. Hope that makes sense. If not, once again, as I said, just contact me. Um, cool. Kate said, please say a bit more about what is my hero story and finding it a guide. Love to. I would love to. Mm. going to get a prop. 1 second. This book, Resonate. Love this book. Amazing. So it's all about doing it's where I first got the idea. It's all about doing like speeches and presentations, and I've taken some of the people who do the best presentations and things like Steve Jobs, and over time some of the amazing kind of like wow speeches, and how did they do what they did. And when they were talking about it, it was, say, the people talk about the audience as being the hero. It's not about the person doing the talk saying, look at me, I'm special. It's about the people who are listening to be the hero. And they give the kind of like Joseph Campbell's kind of like hero's journey. And if you will, like, it's a story arc, the way a lot of movies are written. And they use the example of like Luke Skywalker and finding Yoda. And so it's about Luke Skywalker's his quest, his, he's like this boy, and all of a sudden he finds Jedi power, and what does he do with it? And he's trained. So the guide comes in, and that's kind of Yoda, and Yoda teaches him what he needs to do, but it's still him learning it, still his battles, his challenges, and eventually at the end, he's makes these insights. But then here comes the coolest thing: is once he's gained that, not only is his life better, but then he goes on to teach other people, and so he becomes the teacher. So I love it all the time when my clients, they get to this point where they start telling me about some of the things and that they're sharing, or the the positive impact that they're making in other people's lives now, because they're kind of at that different space now. So they've kind of learned so much, and they're kind of sharing it with other people. The way that they're living is becoming just more inspiring to those around them. And so that's kind of what I mean. The hero, you are your own hero. It's your journey. It's your story. I once liked the idea of calling, I once liked the idea of calling myself the wellness director, because what I really do is help you guys create the narrative in your life. And so if you've got stories, your stories can make you feel terrible. They can hurt you, or they can heal you and nurture you and support you. But you're still the one living your experience. So I see myself, I don't see that, I see myself as a strategist, a wellness strategist. So I provide tools, insights, ideas, but it's always a strategy that you can hopefully not think about, but embody. And as you embody them, they start changing your life. See, what we've talked about here is just some thoughts. Hopefully, for some of you, it's shifted the way you've thought about things or created an opening. Now, we like to create a generative thought, and a generative thought or tool is one that changes over time. It gets better the more you think about it, the more you use it. So, like, for example, when you practice for the first time, the picture in your mind's eye of how you want to see yourself, if you do that once, it can be really powerful. But if you did that once a day, whew, the more you use it, the more powerful it becomes. And same with being able to focus on something. Can you say, I'm going to focus on this? And then if you make that a reality, then whew, that's going to happen. More likely than going into your victim, I can't be bothered. This is back into your stories, like back into the anger and whatever. That client who told me, how much time she'd spent being angry. She'd always described her partner as being the super optimistic one and her the negative one. That was the story that she had of herself. The way she saw herself as she was the negative one, but her partner was the super amazing positive one. When she came in for a session and she told me the situation, she says, I out positive him in something happened, and she realized that she was offering the positive solution because she had learned to kind of start controlling her thinking. Pretty cool, hey? um yes, you guys are answering your questions. I love it. um how do you jump out of your world to see life in a different perspective? There's a lot of different techniques and skills, things to do. I would say the very best one to do is just to start playing with your imagination. You can lie in bed tonight before you go to bed and close your eyes and just kind of relax your breathing. Unless, of course, you're someone who suffers from anxiety and you've done crap when someone's told you some bullshit about your breathing. Excuse my language, but I get so annoyed at all the rubbish out there. Then don't worry about that, but just put yourself into a relaxed state however you can. For those of you who can't, then find someone to help you learn how to relax. And then what happens is you just visualize what it would be like to be maybe a bird flying in the sky, looking down. And you kind of like just imagine like going over the rocks or over the water and looking around, seeing your wings and seeing other birds, and then maybe change perspective. I mean, you can do things like you can imagine you're a tree and just looking or watching, a bit of bark and watching ants go down. You can imagine you're someone. Just it's just pretty much in a word, use your imagination. But the more you do it, the more you start being able to develop the skills. And there's other things that we teach called borrowed genius and a whole bunch of tools, but it always is using your mind. Um, when you're a baby, and someone goes ooh or you kind of smile and the baby mimics you. The reason that works is because I think called mirror neurons. Those part of our neurons in our brain that kind of learn to kind of respond and react to what's in the environment. And so you've seen people who have been super relaxed. We all know what it looks like to see like someone meditating in this amazing place, or the Dalai Lama or whatever, and see the serenity. And so those mirror neurons have been activated when they've seen that. And so if you take the time, you can actually access that in your own neurology. Now, of course, the first time you do anything, we're not highly skilled at it, but the more attention and focus and intention that you have to make that it happen, you'll start noticing some cool things. For the moment, just do something fun, just kind of see things from a different perspective. Now, are you ever going to know 100% sure that you've got it 100% right? The answer is no, but it's also not important. As important as it's just a different perspective. But you'll be amazed, so amazed at what you can kind of find. Um, you guys are a great group. Now, we've been going for over an hour right now. I was only planning on going for about 30, 40 minutes, but I'm being so happy to answer your questions. I'm just going to make sure I've answered everything that I wanted to kind of talk about today um, before we go. Okay, I'm pretty happy. I think we got most, if not all, of what I wanted to cover. Maybe not so clear, and some of it's kind of embedded in the questions. The key thing that I really want you to understand is that don't let yourself be defined by your traumas. Don't let life's certain challenges restrict you of past. Be defined by the future that you want to create for yourself. Find a compelling vision of how you want to be. Find a coach, find a helper, find a healer, find anyone who has a good record of helping people kind of get amazing results. All the trauma is, well, not all, but one of the things is it's just a whole bunch of energy that is now trapped into your body. But you are different to who you are when that happened. And when we kind of can redistribute that energy in a constructive way and give you mindset and tools, then you can kind of fully change your life in a constructive way of that you decide how you want to do it. Remember, you are the hero in this journey. So you guys are amazing. Thank you for showing up tonight. I really appreciate it. For other people who are watching this on the replay, when that happens, you didn't get to ask questions, but you still got some cool information. And these people who answered good questions, you can be grateful because they've helped shape this into a wonderful webinar. We have seen some clients out here and some other people's names I don't know. In our clinic, we offer people a free 20-minute consultation. So if you'd like to come in and chat about, see how I can help you, at the end of this webinar, everyone's going to be taken to that page. So there's like a little online booking. You can find a time, and if you want, you can come and meet me in person and ask any questions. I love helping people transform their lives. I see the most amazing things, and I know so many people who are stuck in these horrible places. Um, Maybe they didn't identify it was so bad. Maybe they didn't realize the trauma was what was causing them to be stuck. Maybe 100 things. Who knows? But you guys have. For whatever reasons got you here, it's because of a part of you wants something. There's that desire in the side that wants more knowledge, wants more information, wants strategies, that wants your life to be better. So that's what I'm saying. You guys are the hero. And so feel free to share this if you can with anyone you want. Have an amazing night, guys, and be in touch. Lots of love. Bye.